Has your sister ever crushed you, right before your entire family? I have. It happened during my parents' anniversary party. My fork hadn't touched the buttercream frosting when Olivera shot up from her seat. Her chair scraping against the floor echoed in the sudden silence that fell over the room. That was my sister, Olivera. In our family, her word was law. She held up a thick stack of papers, the glossy, full-color print shining under the dining room lights like evidence in a courtroom. Her eyes scanned the table before landing squarely on me. Starting next month, Olivera's voice was as cold as steel. Natalie will pay $6,200 a month for the apartment she's renting. That's triple the current rate. The family discount is over. The entire table was frozen. Behind me I could hear the slow, heavy tick-tock of my grandmother's grandfather clock, each beat hammering against my temples. A few of my relatives let out low whistles. Someone even smiled, as if Olivera had just made a noble and challenging decision. I looked around the table. My father stared down into his wine glass. My mother's hand trembled as she touched her water glass. No one said a word. Not a single person. Olivera wasn't finished. Her voice was flat, dripping with contempt. You're 31, Natalie. Old enough to stand on your own 2 feet. If you don't sign the new lease, be ready to move out. I have 3 Columbia students ready to pay even more. A ripple of laughter came from the end of the table. I felt my throat tighten, my heart pounding in my chest. But on the outside, I showed nothing, because I was used to it. Used to being seen as the weak one. Used to sit at the corner of the table, silently listening to everyone praise her. Used to the piercing silence of my own parents. But this time, my silence wasn't a surrender. I gripped my water glass so tightly my knuckles turned white. My gaze locked onto Olivera. She remained standing, triumphant, like a judge who had just delivered a final verdict. Around me, whispers spread like an unstoppable tide. Olivera is so fair. It's time for Natalie to take care of herself. And $6,200 is the market rate. After all, every word was a small cut. I swallowed the bitter taste in my throat, feeling something swell in my chest that was no longer fear. It was rage. I set my glass down on the table. The sound of glass hitting wood was sharp and final. My fingers trembled slightly, but my eyes didn't waver. I looked straight into the camera of my mind, as if I were speaking directly to you, the person listening to this story. They thought I would quietly sign the papers. They thought I would forever be in their debt. But they didn't know. I had been preparing for this day for a very, very long time. Just then, the phone in my pocket vibrated. A short message appeared on the screen. On my way. The portfolio is ready. I lifted my head and took a deep breath, letting the heavy silence hang in the air for a few more seconds. Olivera's lips curled into a smirk, confident of her victory. My relatives looked at me, waiting for the loser to bow her head in defeat. But inside me, a storm was gathering. That night, in front of our entire family, Olivera thought she would crush me with a cold, hard number. But in that exact moment I knew. The one about to be crushed wasn't me. It was her. Olivera had always been the center of every family gathering. She would walk into a room without a word, and all eyes would turn to her. My parents spoke of her with a strange, breathless pride. She just closed a massive real estate deal. Her law firm is expanding again. The praise was endless. And me? I sat at the far end of the table, getting a perfunctory question tossed my way. Natalie, is your little software job still going okay? And just like that, the conversation would swing back to Olivera. I was a stranger in my own home. Olivera wasn't just successful. She knew how to turn her success into a performance. At every get-together, she had a new story to tell, casting herself as the hero of the family drama. And of course, she always brought up her role in managing our grandmother's properties. I spend so much time on paperwork, meeting with tenants, all without taking a single dime, she'd say, glancing my way. It's a sacrifice for the family. I knew the truth. Not taking a dime meant she held all the power. And I was the prime example. The apartment I lived in on Riverside Drive originally belonged to my grandmother. But ever since she grew frail, Olivera took over its management. I became a tenant in my own childhood home. The lease she drafted was clear, $21 to $100 a month. That's the discount price, she had said with a benevolent smile, as if granting me a great favor. Anyone else would pay at least $2,400, I signed. I paid, I kept quiet, even when the heater was broken for 3 months straight in winter, even when the ceiling leaked after a summer storm, even when the dishwasher stopped working. I never complained. Because in the eyes of my family, that was my role. The grateful little sister, forever receiving charity from her perfect older sister. But there was a secret Olivera never knew. 3 years ago, when my grandmother was still alive, I would visit her every Sunday evening. She often asked me to help organize her papers, review bank statements, and sort through investment files. I wasn't a genius, but I was patient. I read every line, explaining each dividend and every fee. One evening, she pulled me close, her thin, frail hand resting on mine. She gave me a thick envelope. "Olivera is brilliant, but she doesn't see everything," she whispered. "You're different. You're quiet, but you notice. Keep this. One day it will save you." I opened the envelope. Inside was an investment portfolio, the business card of a lawyer no one in the family knew, and a handwritten note. "Don't let your silence become your chains. Turn it into your strength." At that moment, all I could hear was the frantic beating of my own heart. I didn't fully understand what she meant, but I felt it clearly. She was giving me something more valuable than any asset. She was giving me her faith. A few months later, she passed away. The funeral felt like another one of Olivera's performances. She delivered a flowery eulogy, my relatives wept, and everyone praised her. I stood back, clutching the envelope in my purse. No one had a clue. Then one day my phone rang. The voice on the other end belonged to the man from the business card. He introduced himself as my grandmother's private attorney. "She left you a separate inheritance," he said, his eyes sharp as he pushed a file across the desk toward me. "This was not part of the general will. It is for your eyes only. It's enough to invest. It's enough to change everything." I sat there stunned. My hands trembled as I turned the pages. The numbers on the paper seemed to dance before my eyes. My grandmother's words echoed in my head. "One day, it will save you." I walked out of that office holding the chance to change my life. I knew I couldn't tell anyone, not my parents, not my relatives, and certainly not Olivera. From that day on, I began to prepare in silence. But it was no longer the silence of weakness. It was the silence of a woman building her foundation. I continued to pay my rent on time. I continued to endure the sarcastic remarks. I continued to sit at the corner of the table at family parties, but behind the scenes I was learning to invest. I was listening to my lawyer's counsel. I was letting every dollar grow. Olivera thought she was carrying the family. The truth was, day by day, I was building a fortress of my own. A fortress that not even she, with all her prestige and power, could ever tear down. After my grandmother passed, Olivera officially took over the entire family real estate portfolio. She told everyone she was working for free and shouldering this heavy burden for the family's good. They all nodded in admiration. But I knew the reality. I knew because I was living in one of those properties. I was a tenant in my grandmother's home, and I saw firsthand how Olivera used it as a tool to elevate her own status. At every gathering, she would repeat her lines. "I have to sign so much paperwork because of you. You should be grateful for the discount I'm giving you. Without me, you could never afford to live in this neighborhood." Every sentence was a knife twisting in my self-respect. I swallowed it all. I stayed silent. But inside, the resentment grew day by day. The apartment itself was falling apart. That one winter, the heater was broken for 3 solid months. I wore 2 sweaters to bed and shivered by the window. I sent Olivera an email. No response. When I saw her in person, she just laughed. "You're young. A little cold won't hurt you." Another time, the ceiling leaked after a storm. I lined up buckets and pans to catch the drips and listened to the steady plink-plonk all night. Olivera stopped by, jotted a few notes in her planner, and then disappeared for a month. However, a page-long email reminder would instantly appear in my inbox if my rent payment were a day late. To her, I was just a number on a spreadsheet. I was proof of her sacrifice, the sister she graciously allowed to have a roof over her head. You want to know the irony? I work in tech, project management to be specific. I live and breathe spreadsheets and data. I understood perfectly how Olivera used numbers as a weapon, but she had no idea I was playing a numbers game. Since receiving my grandmother's secret inheritance, I have been learning how to invest. Her private lawyer helped me set up a holding company, a discreet corporate shell. I told no one. I meticulously documented every rent check I transferred. I saved every repair bill I had to pay out of my own pocket. I was building my own file. Day by day, I lived a double life. In front of the family, I was the quiet, grateful younger sister who sat at the corner of the table. But in the shadows, I was the silent owner of decisions they could never have imagined. The more Olivera manipulated the situation, the more certain I became that I had to be patient. I remember one Christmas dinner. She stood in the middle of the living room, raised her wine glass, and announced loudly, "Without me, Natalie's apartment would belong to strangers by now." I saved that place for her. Not everyone is capable of such a sacrifice. The room erupted in applause. I sat perfectly still, my hand gripping my fork so tightly that my knuckles were white. I wanted to scream, "You have no idea I already hold something much bigger." But I didn't. I remained silent. Silence, like a dagger in its sheath. Month by month, I funneled more money into quiet acquisitions. No one knew that. Through my holding company, I had started buying out ownership shares from relatives who wanted to sell quickly. They believed Olivera managed the properties, but the actual transactions passed through my hands. I remember the night I closed the first significant deal. Half of the Riverside building officially belonged to my company. I stood on my apartment balcony, the cold wind whipping against my face, my heart pounding like a war drum. No one in my family knew, but I knew. The game had changed. I quietly collected the pieces while Olivera was busy showing off at parties. Every document, every number. And as the date of my parents' anniversary party approached, I felt it in my bones. Sooner or later, Olivera would make a public move to crush me completely. I was ready. Not just to fight back, but to end the game she had been playing for all these years. The atmosphere after any family dinner was always the same. It was a chorus of praise for Olivera. Her law firm is so busy. Her clients are all millionaires. We're so lucky to have her. And for me? The same old question. "Natalie, are you still at that little company?" And then all eyes would swing back to her. One afternoon, I was leaving my private lawyer's office, a briefcase in my hand, when my Uncle Mark saw me. His eyes narrowed. "What are you doing here?" he asked. "Just some personal paperwork," I replied casually. I knew he would tell her. And sure enough, a few days later, Olivera's email arrived. "As per the contract, I have the full authority to adjust the rent. The new lease is attached, effective next month. Sign it or get out." The signature at the bottom read, "Olivera Hayes, attorney at law." I sat in my apartment and spread all the documents on my dining table. The repair bills, the rent receipts, the demanding emails. On top of it all, I was left with the portfolio my grandmother had left me. The investment certificates, the holding company contracts, and the discrete deeds of transfer. My phone buzzed. It was my lawyer. "All the documentation is ready. Just give the signal when you need me." I clutched the phone. All I had to do was wait for the right moment. At the next few family dinners, Olivera didn't miss a single opportunity to twist the knife. $6,200 is a bargain. Natalie, maybe you should find some roommates. It's a waste for just one person. Laughter erupted around the table. I sat there quietly cutting my steak, saying nothing. But in my mind, I could already hear a judge's gavel striking down a verdict. My mother was silent. My father just drank his wine. Their silence was heavier than any of the taunts. My parents' anniversary was approaching. The entire extended family would be there. I knew Olivera would choose that night to deliver her final blow. I opened my phone the evening before the party and typed 2 words. Tomorrow. The reply was instant. I'll be there. Full portfolio. I stood before the mirror, buttoning my blouse, and looked myself straight in the eye. If they want to put me on trial, I whispered, I'll let them. But I'm the one who will deliver the sentence. On the party night, the room was bright with festive lights. A dozen relatives sat around the long dining table, their wine glasses sparkling, the air filled with laughter. But I knew it was all a fragile facade. Just as the cake was brought out, Olivera stood up. Her chair scraped loudly. The room fell silent. She held up the stack of papers, her voice ringing like a judge reading a sentence. After years of family consideration, today I am announcing the new market rate rent for Natalie, $6,200 a month. She will sign the lease tonight. Whispers spread across the table. One of my cousins whistled. Whoa, Natalie, get ready to couch surf. Another one laughed. You're going to need a few roommates. My father looked down. My mother gripped her wine glass, silent. Not a single person came to my defense. Olivera pushed the contract toward me. Sign it and let's get this over with. I looked at the paper. The number 6,200 was printed in bold, a clear challenge. I picked up the pen. The entire room held its breath, expecting me to bow my head. I set the pen back down on the table. I did not sign. One word escaped my lips, clear and cold. No. The silence was shattered. I heard a few choked coughs. A spoon clattered to the floor. Olivera frowned. What did you say? I said I will not be signing that. She let out a short, sharp laugh. Natalie, don't be a child. This is the market rate. If you can't afford it, you can leave. I lifted my head, my voice calm but loud enough for the whole room to hear. You don't have the authority to set this rate. This apartment is no longer under your management. Olivera froze. What nonsense are you talking about? At that exact moment, the doorbell rang. Every head turned. I stood up and strolled to the door. Standing outside was a man in a dark suit, a leather briefcase in his hand. I opened the door. He stepped inside, his voice deep and steady. Good evening. My name is Mr. Reynolds. I'm the legal representative for Riverside Holdings, LLC. A confused murmur filled the room. Olivera's face hardened. What is Riverside Holdings? I manage this building. The lawyer adjusted his glasses, his voice resonating with authority. Not anymore. The Riverside Holdings Corporation acquired this building 3 years ago. I am here tonight to make that ownership clear to everyone. I stepped forward and placed my hand on the portfolio he was holding. My eyes swept across the room. Olivera no longer has any authority over this apartment, and as of this moment, she knows it. A wave of shock rippled through the room. My relatives looked at me as if they were truly seeing me for the first time. Olivera shook her head, her voice trembling slightly. That's impossible. I handle all the paperwork. If the ownership changed, I would know. My gaze remained fixed on hers. You didn't know, because you never paid attention. For 3 years I was silent. But silence doesn't mean weakness. It means preparation. Olivera stood there, her face ashen. Then she exploded. This is a lie. Natalie can't even afford a single room, let alone an entire building. This lawyer is deceiving all of you. Mr. Reynolds opened his briefcase, pulled out a thick file, and slapped it on the dining table. The sound echoed through the silent room. Here is the certificate of ownership. Here are the property tax receipts for the past 3 years. And here are the contracts for the building's renovations. All of them in the name of Natalie Hayes. The room buzzed with whispers and the scraping of chairs as everyone leaned in to see the papers. Olivera threw up her hands. No, I'm the one who signed Natalie's lease agreements. I'm the one in charge, of course. Here's the next. I stepped forward, my voice steady and clear. You did sign contracts, that's true. But not as the landlord. You signed them as a subtenant. And for the past 3 years, you had no idea that you were paying rent to me. A single shocked laugh erupted from the end of the table, then was instantly stifled. Olivera swayed on her feet. No, that's impossible. I'm the manager. I protected this building. I pulled another set of papers from my bag and laid them next to Mr. Reynolds's portfolio. Here are the emails you sent me demanding every last penny of rent. Here are the receipts I had to pay myself when the heater broke and when the ceiling leaked. This is the proof that you treated me like a charity case, while you were the one living in a property you didn't own. The air in the room grew thick and heavy. I could hear the loud ticking of the clock, the scrape of a fork against a plate. Olivera looked around, searching for an ally. My father stared at his hands. My mother bit her lip. My relatives avoided her gaze. I took one more step toward her. You appointed yourself the judge in this room and read me my sentence. But you forgot one thing. The law doesn't care about arrogance. The law cares about paperwork. And this paperwork, all of it, has my name on it. Mr. Reynolds nodded, his voice firm. Riverside Holdings, the corporation representing Natalie Hayes, acquired this entire building 3 years ago. From that day forward, every tenant here, including Miss Olivera Hayes, has been a guest of the new owner. The whispers exploded. An aunt covered her mouth. Oh my God, a cousin blurted out. So all this time, Olivera was just a tenant too? Olivera shook her head frantically, her hands trembling. No, I never signed anything like that. I am not a tenant. I looked her directly in the eye, my voice final. You did. You signed every invoice. You signed every repair order. You signed them without ever bothering to read them. And every single one of those signatures confirmed your status as a tenant in this very building. Olivera was speechless. She stumbled backward, nearly falling into her chair. The room erupted in conversation. The same people who had laughed at me were now looking at each other in stunned confusion. The silence from my parents was now evidence of the truth. They could no longer protect her. I took a deep breath. My voice rang out, clear and resolute. For 3 years I was silent. They thought I was weak. But my silence wasn't surrender. My silence was preparation. And tonight, I am no longer sitting at the corner of the table. I'm the owner of this room, of this building, of this story. Olivera opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Her face was pale, her eyes darting around the room, looking for an escape that wasn't there. No one offered her a hand. Mr. Reynolds closed his briefcase with a sharp click. One last thing. All lease agreements in this building will now be re-signed directly with the sole proprietor, Natalie Hayes. I looked around the room. As my relative's eyes met mine, for the first time, I saw neither pity nor contempt. I saw a stunned sort of respect. I placed my hands on the table, emphasizing every word. The rules of the game have changed. A dead silence fell over the room. Olivera slumped into her chair, her hands gripping the table's edge so tightly her knuckles were white. Her usual air of arrogance had vanished entirely. My mother's eyes darted between me and my sister. My father's wine glass was empty, and his silence was no longer a weapon against me. It was an admission of defeat. Olivera's voice was a ragged whisper. No, this can't be. I held this family together. You sacrificed nothing, I replied, my voice void of emotion. You took advantage. For years you used me as your shadow to make yourself look brighter. But today the light has shifted. The whisper started again. My God. So all this time Olivera was... We blamed the wrong person, an aunt muttered. It's just karma. Olivera whipped her head around. You all believe her? I'm a lawyer. I know the law better than anyone. Mr. Reynolds, ever calm, pushed the portfolio towards her. Please read it. Every seal, every signature is legally binding. And the owner of record is not Olivera Hayes. It's Natalie Hayes. Olivera couldn't even hold the file. It slipped from her grasp and fell onto the table, the pages fanning like cards of judgment. I didn't look at her anymore. I looked directly at my parents, I used to wait for one of you to stand up for me, just once. But year after year, all I got was silence. And that very silence taught me that I had to learn to stand up for myself. Today, I no longer need your protection. My mother froze. My father parted his lips, but no words came out. The next day, my phone rang nonstop. The first call was from Olivera. Her voice was trembling. Can we talk? You're not actually going to make me pay rent, are you? We're sisters. I almost laughed. Sisters? I repeated, my voice cold. You didn't seem to remember that when you decided to triple my rent. The other end was silent, except for the sound of ragged breathing. I hung up. A week later, my mother called. Her voice was thin and brittle. You have embarrassed this family. People are going to laugh at us. I closed my eyes and took a long breath. No, Mother. I didn't embarrass the family. I just stopped letting the family embarrass me. If you feel shame, it's only because the truth is no longer being hidden. I heard a heavy sigh, and then the line went dead. I put the phone down, my hand no longer shaking. I poured my energy into my real work, managing the building. I had the heating system overhauled, the wiring updated, and the hallways repainted. The residents quickly noticed the difference. One afternoon, an elderly woman from the third floor took my hand, her smile warm and genuine. Thank you, dear Natalie, she said. It's been years since anyone truly cared about this place, or about us. Her words were worth more than all the praise my family had ever showered on Olivera. Late one evening, I was locking the lobby doors when I saw Olivera standing outside on the sidewalk. The streetlight cast a pale glow on her face. Her arms were crossed, her eyes dry but bloodshot. We looked at each other, for the first time in a long time, with no audience between us. You've changed, she said, her voice hoarse. I shook my head. No, Olivera, I just stopped letting you control the narrative. She blinked, her lips moving to form a word, but nothing came out. Then she turned and walked away, her heels clicking on the pavement, fading into the night. I stood there long, breathing in the clean, cold air. For the first time in years, I felt free. I was no longer a shadow. I no longer needed anyone's approval. The building stood tall behind me, its windows lit up like stars. And I knew that every brick, every contract, was a testament to my choice. And I want to say this to you, the person listening to my story. You are not defined by the silence of others. You do not have to live in a shadow that someone else has cast. Sometimes, justice doesn't arrive with applause. It comes with a contract, a signature, and a truth that can no longer be denied. I learned how to stand up, and so can you.